Welcome to the Swedish House of Finance. The Swedish House of Finance is the national financial research center located at the Stockholm School of Economics. My name is Per Wisén, and I will moderate this seminar. The topic today is an inclusive digital payments market. And there are two reasons why we felt it was important to tackle exactly this topic at this particular time. And the first one is that a lot is happening around us. Notes and coins are quickly disappearing in the Swedish financial system. We see fintech innovations almost daily in the newspapers, and this brings a lot of good things with it. Life is easier and productivity goes up, but there may be problems as well in the development, and we need to figure out what these are in good time in order to be able to remedy them. And so the second good reason to have this seminar is that the Swedish government has appointed a government inquiry into exactly this topic. And this inquiry is chaired by Kinberg Batra, and they are presently sort of midway into their work. They have done more or less half of it. And most of the participants in this seminar are Swedish, and Anna Kinberg Batra is a very well-known person. I don't think I need to explain who she is, but we have, for the non-Swedes here, she is presently involved in various board positions, in advisory groups and advisory committees, lots of them, and this inquiry is the reason why we have her here today, and we are very much interested in that. When I looked at how she described herself in her Twitter account, she added that I only do things that are fun. Mm-hmm. And I also was close to becoming the first female Swedish prime minister, she says in the Twitter account. So Anna, we are very proud and happy to have you here. And I leave it to you to describe the topic and what the inquiry is working with. And you have our full attention for the coming 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Per. I'm very happy to be here and happy to meet all of you. I should perhaps also say that I'm also a proud alumni of the school, which gave me some background. When I was chair of the finance committee in the Swedish parliament, when I became that in 2010, Swedes still paid cash, went to the bank, used the well-known older systems for anything. And during and after that period, really, during the last 10 years, this has changed a lot, not only in cash payments or not. I mean, at this summer, 1.33% of the kronor in circulating were in cash, and the rest was not. And what happened during this time was also that a lot of payment services and so evolved, driven very much in a way innovation-wise by private actors and private initiatives and entrepreneurships and so on. And from this background, after leaving politics, I also worked with some of them. And I hope that the background combining both business, politics, and some academia may be suitable for this role. I find at least that they are all three very applicable. So please, I get help with this. Now, vi kan ta den nästa egentligen direkt. So during this time, Sweden has become a fintech hub, not least for payment companies. If you look at some of the big ones in the world, actually, at this time, a few of them are actually even founded in Sweden. Last time I left politics after the general elections of 2002, I worked for a few years with the newly founded Stockholm School of Economics Business Lab, where one of the younger projects eventually grew into becoming Klarna. They started and had their first press release and business plan and so on in 2004 or 2005, and has now, of course, evolved into something much bigger. Also, Niklas Sennström is well known in the tech community, and then, of course, also for innovations that has driven innovation and have driven the market, and not least changed Swedes' habits quite a lot. No one really talked about that when I chair the finance committee. Kicki Westerståhl did, who is online in this seminar and participating. We met the first time during that time because you saw that there were people who couldn't get bank accounts, who couldn't manage their household economy, and so on, as these services grew and as habits changed, which of course Dr. Lusardi will also talk a bit more about. So this has evolved quite quickly. And the inquiry was then launched in December last year. We are on our way of becoming the first cashless society in the world if we want to. And part of my job is to find out if we want to. And to that end, we also launched then a survey to check with Swedes about their attitudes towards that. So we are requested to review the future role of the state on the payments market. Started working, finding and talking to experts, academics, banks, payment services, innovators, and the like, and then launched this survey this summer. We are due to leave our full report next autumn after the general elections, which is good because you can then also move freer, I think, intellectually. Yes, please. So the remit and everything is available online. You can find everything about us on betalningsutredningen.se, mostly in Swedish, not only, hopefully, with a newsletter and everything. Here is a bit about the remit. We are studying and actually trying to find out how does the payment market actually look at this point. One very important thing, the more digital systems you have, is the integrity and security for the system and also for individuals. Now, we move from a society, the industrial society, not least a centrally managed society, where you went physically to the bank, took out your cash from your deposit, went home, used cash. It's easy to sort of overlook. Whereas the millennials, as Dr. Lusardi will touch upon, as well as Kicki Westerståhl, meet a world where payments flow digitally. You can't touch them, you can't even see them perhaps, and they do so individually and through different devices. And that's something completely different. Whereas the objective of a payment system is still, in a sense, still the same, to be secure and effective, to enable payments. We are also asked by government to look at this in times of crisis, ultimately war. The systems have to work also in non-peacetime, which includes, of course, when the electricity grid or the phone grid don't function fully. The Swedish Riksbank is investigating and testing and pilot testing e-currency, as do several other countries in the world, which is also happening now, so we'll touch upon that. And where appropriate, we will also suggest new legislation next year, if so. Då kan vi ta nästa. We have formed advisory groups where Professor Bo Becker from this institution is one of them, and where we also include private sector and other relevant authorities and so on. I got to chair the inquiry myself. I've got brilliant experts on my team. So we do have a team with people from the government offices, but also with experience from the Riksbank committee, from private sector, law, innovation, academia, and so on, to get the best possible competence mixed around me to do this. And we seek, this is not a parliamentary committee, but having been in politics myself, I know that there's no point really in tabling legislation or legislative proposals if we don't anchor them, which we will do and try to, at least in a reference group with all political parties, so they will be informed. So we did a poll and published it actually this week. This is brand new, on the Swedish public's attitudes towards all of this. And let me start with a positive note. I told you and showed you that only just over 1% is in cash. 90% of Swedes are generally positive to digital payments. It doesn't always sound that way. We see that in the In our electronic letterbox, most of the people who are angry with something are angry about cash and the getting cash and so on, and a change and things. But in general, Swedes have a digital everyday life. 9 out of 10 also have access to not only internet, but also smartphones. So it works for most of people. However, obviously, 1/10 of the population is 1 million persons that also need to get their everyday life to work. We'll come back to that. The corona pandemic in Sweden, as in the rest of the world, accelerated digitalization trends, took even the elderly into e-commerce, for example. However, the over 65 still need more help with the digital payments, and you can clearly see that. Fun facts in the survey results, which are in full available on Betalningsutredningen SE, are that albeit Swedes are quite digital and find it and look positively towards technology development and the like, they still sometimes have strong emotions against it. They don't really know if they like it or not. And results actually go into different directions here, which is interesting. And we so far call it the cash paradox. You use digital payments all the time, and you still answer that you couldn't imagine life without cash. Key success factors, I think, if this is to succeed, is really security. We asked the respondents to tell us which factors are the most important for you to go to be more digital or entirely so. And the 2 major security issues came out on top. On system level, it's really about resilience. It is about the system will have to work and be efficient and secure even in crisis. And Swedes know that that's not always the case. There was a huge security breach this summer in one of the 2 major food store chains, which sort of reminded everyone about the vulnerability in digital systems. On the individual level, this is really about personal integrity and data protection. Also here, one hypothesis of mine, not being super academic, but still an hypothesis, is really that the personal integrity and rights to one's data are quite newly discussed in Sweden. Maybe we have been, or at least legislators have been a bit naive about that. We trust the system. Swedes have high levels of trust, and we come from that, so we trust digital systems as well until something really bad happens, and then we started questioning it. That's about where we have the Swedish population at this time, which is good for an inquiry like this, because that gives you awareness of the importance of personal integrity and security, without which digital systems don't function because they won't earn people's trust. Okay, so questions to you and questions for the seminar and the coming work. That's my alarm reminding me to stay within my time limits, but just take these few last seconds to finish. I'm really curious on how to narrow the digital divide. 9 out of 10 Swedes are globally super digital, and that's a lot. But huge groups with millions of people are not, or not enough. And that is a huge challenge that has to be addressed for getting this to work. I don't believe in turning back the clock, but my task and any legislator's boss is the people and is the entire population. And this has to work also for elderly people who can't see, use their hands, or are bad bank customers. They also need to be included in a system. And I definitely haven't found easy answers to that. And I'm very curious in hearing your views about that. Also, what's the international best practice? So Sweden and Norway are among the most digital countries in the world. Some countries are already launching e-currencies. But what is the international best practice in securing digital payment systems that allow competition and check for people's population's security on individual level? And how, finally, can digitalization and further digitalization be part of the solution instead of being seen as a problem, which in essence it's not. On the contrary, this has helped people gain better everyday lives, and the legislator's job is to secure that everyday lives are as good as can be, including the payment systems. I think that's the last picture, so I'll leave it here. This is how to contact us, so please do. Möjligen ska jag slänga upp den bilden igen. I hope you saw that. Betalningsutredningen.se. Looking forward to this seminar and see it as a start of a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Those were great questions, and we will come back to them, all of them, but we will do a little round of presentations first. So next, Annamaria Lusardi. Very much welcome back to the Swedish House of Finance. You are, for those who do not know you, I have to read the formalities, Professor of Economics and Accountancy at the George Washington University School of Business and the founder and academic director of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center. And not least the latter, I guess, is what you are very well known for, promoting financial literacy and studying the importance of financial literacy. And you have defined a whole new research area in doing this, which is a great achievement. And as we have said, you have visited us many times. You were received the Scandia Award a little while ago for excellence in research. And you have promised today to explain to us a study you've done on the effects of digitalization, paper called Millennium Mobile Payment Users, a look into their personal finances and financial behaviors. Please, Annamaria Lusardi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So first of all, thank you for this invitation. I am delighted to be back to Sweden, even though virtually. I have been so many times in Sweden. I have many co-authors and I have to say a lot of friends, and I look forward to visiting Sweden again in person. The presentation I would like to give today tries to combine many of the topics that you have been discussing, kind of financial inclusion, fintech, and method of payments. And I'm going to show and refer to a study about method of payments in particular, and looking at millennials, which is the generation which is around the world normally more financially savvy, and try to look at data before the crisis and before the pandemic. So we have some sense already of what was happening as this fintech was developing among the young. So let me now share my screen and go to that presentation, which I hope you can see. So I, first of all, I'm going to, as I've mentioned, look at a specific group of the population. These are 18 to 34 years old. So they are kind of the millennials. And in many ways, they are, of course, the generation which is a lot more financially savvy around the world. I'm going to look specifically at the experience of the US, where technology has become important, but I wouldn't claim that the US is the country that is going cashless anytime soon. But I think focusing on the generation which is using technology the most can give us some important insight. So let me continue. What we did is, first of all, work with the regulator, FINRA Investor Education Foundation. And in 2015 already, we started collecting data on a very large sample of the US population and started looking at basically method of payments. And in particularly using mobile, using your phone, for example, to make method of payments, and trying to understand what are the implications of doing so. And we were so struck by those findings, which I'm going to mention in a moment, that we ended up doing our own survey. That's why we call it the GFLEC Mobile Payment Survey, where we focus a lot more basically on people and in particular millennial, using technology, using fintech for the payment method in particular. Now you can, of course, fintech does a lot more things now, but the method of payment has been the bigger, in a sense, development, and also what people use the most. So in particular at that time, I think just using and looking at these, how people make payments and what are some of the characteristics and some of the implication can be quite important. And we have a relatively large sample, and we can compare also data with our representative sample of millennial, again, in the US. So one of the things I want to tell you, first of all, is about financial literacy, as you can imagine. And as you know, we have designed 3 simple questions, and they've become known as just the big 3, but they are really measuring the ABC of personal finance, whether people know interest compounding, inflation, and risk diversification. So this is literally the ABC. And the first thing I want to show and kind of to warn you about is just how little financial literacy is, not just in a sense around the world, but in one of the countries which has the most developed financial markets. And where people, as I'm going to show you in a moment, young people are already quite involved in their financial lives. In the US, people start their economic life in debt, they carry student loan, and we are going to see in a moment the millennials have all variety of asset and actually debt, but they are dealing with those with very, very low level of financial literacy. In fact, the financial literacy is the lowest among the young, and this is obvious because, of course, the young are young and they don't know anything yet. But I think what I want to show you, just to show just how, in a sense, low the level of financial literacy is, which is, I think, our main message from our studies. It's not that people have low financial literacy, but just how low it is given how many decisions people are asked to make. And here I want to show you some of those decisions. And I just want to show you that, these millennials, so people 18 to 34, already have a variety of asset and liabilities. But, if you look at their balance sheet in aggregate, they are very leveraged on all of the assets they have. So for example, even though they have a checking account, many are overdrawing from their checking account. If they own a home, where several already are, even though they are very young, most of them have a mortgage. They have a checking account, they have retirement account, but they are already withdrawing from those accounts. For example, paying fees. They have a college degree, but they carry student loan. And when they use credit card, they use them in a rather expensive way. So again, there are lots of financial transactions going on among these millennials, and there is a lot of debt, in a sense, also in the balance sheet of these young people. So much so that when we ask them, almost half told us already, and they are very young at the beginning of their life, and they say, I have too much debt. So, just to tell you a little bit how are these millennials facing and what some of the things that happens to them. This is important because now we are going to look at, how they are making payments. And remember that in the US, most of the payments are also connected with the capacity to borrow, right? So if you pay using your credit card, you can postpone payment well into the future. So you are paying, but also borrowing. So we have asked this question, which is also the question that was in the data set of the regulator, whether people are using their mobile phone to pay for a product of or service in a store, in a gas station, in a restaurant, and so on. And we define as user of this mobile payment if they do it so frequently or sometimes, right? And one of the things I want to just to show you that many millennials use these mobile payments. We are very far away from Sweden. Only about half are using this in 2015. So probably there are a lot more now. But yet again, this is of course a substantial fraction. And in our own data set, where we look using Amazon Turk, about half of these millennials are actually using the mobile payment. And interestingly, if we look at who are using the mobile payment, and I don't know whether the same is true in other countries, but it's very clear in the US, these are the people that are more educated, they are more working full-time, are high income, but they are also much more likely to be male. And interestingly, they are a lot more likely to be, for example, African Americans. So I think, maybe the technology has really targeted a specific group, or it has really attracted a specific group in the population. But if you look at this population, what I wanted to say is it looks more of a privileged group. This is not the kind of, low educated or the low income person. We find in both surveys that, technology is used by people which have higher education and higher income. So these are potentially those who should be doing better. When we look at the millennials, they are certainly used by those who have more assets, more likely to have assets like house, retirement account, or checking account. But they are also a lot more used by millennials that carry debt. So, for example, they have a credit card, an auto loan, student loan, even a mortgage, but also an home equity loan. So people who are attracted or use the mobile payment are also those more likely to borrow on a variety of that instrument, even though, again, they are more likely to have higher income and higher education. And here are some of the things that I kind of wanted to say. Okay, so if we look at those people, if we look at the method of payments, right? They are a privileged population. They carry a lot of debt. So how are they doing? When we look at their behavior toward credit cards, they seem to be using the credit card, which they are often in their mobile payment, in a more expensive way. So I wonder, here we cannot assess causality, but I wonder if what you don't see, right, end up for you actually being more expensive. In other words, you might use your credit card more often, and you might pay more often, or, you might delay the payment more often. Perhaps you don't see it, and this is what happens. Okay. When we look even at simple things, if they have a checking account, interestingly, what we find is that people who use a mobile payment are a lot more likely to overdraw from their checking account. And remember that overdrawing from the checking account generates a lot of fees, right? And yet again, I feel like, well, you don't see the payments, right? They go into your kind of, watch and so on, and you don't keep track of this. And what you end up is actually overdrawing from the checking account. And this is actually true from both surveys that we have done as well. And the other interesting things, and this is, I think, quite a dramatic data, many young people in the US already use non-bank services. What I'm talking about is payday loans, pawn shop, rent-to-own, auto title loans. These are basically that instrument that are not offered by banks and that they charge very, very, very high interest rate. So we see like a behavior toward debt, which is going toward expensive, in a sense, method of payments. And they are substantially more likely to happen among these people who might be, in a sense, maybe borrowing too much. And they are those also much more likely to use, as we'll see in a moment, method of payments. Okay. So, for example, even if you look at another behavior, overdrawing your overdrawing your retirement account, where yet again, you have to pay fees, in a sense, you are already using your retirement account and borrowing against it. And yet again, is much more likely to happen among those using method of payments, those using the mobile payments. So in other words, we have these sophisticated, potentially, people using mobile payments, but then they ended up, borrowing a lot more, using a lot more, for example, expensive method of payments, expensive borrowing methods. They're already borrowing against their retirement account. So here is another, I think, surprising result for us, which is that those who are using mobile payment are a lot more likely to have less financial literacy. And this is true even if we control for a lot of other characteristics. So, this segment of, using technology, paying it quick is disproportionately more attractive to those which have lower financial literacy. And I think this is something to consider, people that think, this is easy, right? It is mindless, are also those which have lower financial literacy. Yet again, this is a correlation, but something to be thinking about, because maybe technology is really appealing to those, because they know less, might end up being more in trouble. And this is actually what I want to show you now, which is unfortunately what we see is when we look at this behavior, like spending more than income, overdrawing from your checking account and using these alternative financial services, for example, payday lending, we see that people who use mobile payments are much more likely to basically do all of this bad behavior. So again, there is this, the mobile payments group is a lot more likely not to be savvy financially. And, if you have low financial literacy, unfortunately, you are also much more, likely to engage in this poor behavior. But, if you use mobile payment and you are financially literate, you are less likely to engage in that behavior. So in other words, what am I trying to say is that, and let me just already come to the conclusion that, I think fintech brings great opportunities, and certainly it's very present among the young. But fintech is not a substitute for financial literacy. So I think as the fintech field and the technology grows, we have to make sure that people use it the best and use it for their own advantage. And sometimes I don't think we need, to assume necessarily because technology is easy and, it's mindless and you don't see it, is going to just by definition help you. Perhaps what you don't see might hurt you. The fact that you don't keep control anymore, how much you borrow, how much you pay, might make you pay too much, might make you buy too much. And I think this is a little bit the warning of this paper, which is that we need to accompany this cashless economy, this rising fintech, with people having the tool to really use it for their own advantage. So thank you, and looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Annamaria. We will come back with more questions from the audience, but just 3 short follow-up questions. One is we have talked a lot about, we have a lot of focus on financial inclusion. How important is financial inclusion, would you say?
So I think, there has been this great movement toward having people participate in the market. And I think we can interpret, in the simple way as well. For example, having people, make method of payment, more formally, right, rather than informally, rather than using cash. So, overall, there has in every country been a strong movement toward people participating formally to the market. And I think technology has been a way to empower people to do so, because otherwise we need a very complex structure. And I think, we cannot stop to financial inclusion. I think people have been promoting financial inclusion as if this is a good thing per se. I actually don't think it's necessarily a good thing per se, because when you participate in financial market, you are participating in something which is risky. Every financial product is risky, including a checking account. A checking account can come with a lot of fees. So, we need to make sure that people have the tools and the knowledge to best participate in the financial market. It's not enough to participate. It's not enough, for example, to make payment easy and simple, because even the payment, in a sense, can hurt you, because you might end up borrowing rather than paying, and you might end up maybe buying too much because it's easy to pay.
Okay, that's a great idea, and we come back to that, I think, after we've heard all the presentation. Just two more short things after your. Do you have knowledge to make policy recommendations that would help these vulnerable groups?
I think one of the policy recommendations I would make, both because of this study, but because of other studies as well, which it's time to add financial literacy in school. It really is time. And looking at the millennials, I think is very obvious. In other words, we need to make sure that people have the knowledge before they engage in financial decision and transactions, which happen now very early. And, you know, every young person has a mobile phone. So I hope that I can say to parents who watch this kid, you know, making payment with the phone. And, you know, I think it's also a matter of equity. You know, if I look at the people who are financially literate now, they are always a very privileged group. Often, you know, they are the one coming from a family which have high income and high education, and they can transfer that knowledge. But we all need the knowledge. You know, we all have a phone for which we can make payments, and we all have to make good decisions. And so I think if we provide it in school, we can find a way to reach everybody, and in particular the young, for which, you know, the world is going to be very different, and technology is going to be the way in which they are going to make financial decisions.
Last question, what sort of research would you like to see in this field going forward?
I think I'd like to see a lot more research, certainly on the role and the importance of fintech, and also the importance of digitalizations. You know, certainly, as Anna said, you know, one of the things that has happened with the crisis is that we have shifted now everybody to technology. And so in which way does kind of technology help us now that everything is so easy, you know, with the push of a button, you can, you know, engage in a big decision. You know, I remember the advertisement of Rocket Mortgage here in the US, and it was really push button, get mortgage. And I hope that's not the case, right? That I really don't get the mortgage as soon as I push the button. But, you know, I think we have technologies allowing us to do these amazing things, but it also, I think, you know, bring the risk of potentially making poor decisions. And so, you know, how can we, first of all, best bridge this digital divide, and what is the role of technology, and in which way technology can help in making good financial decisions?
Thank you. I will give all panel members the opportunity to comment on everything, but I think we should listen to Kicki and Martin before we do that. Kicki Westerståhl, you are CEO, and I'm not sure it's called CEO, it's a foundation you are working with called Swedish Consumers Banking and Finansbyrå. That's my way of translating it to English. An independent agency where you have lots of interest groups and government authorities behind you, and where you sort of keep an eye on, so to speak, what is happening with consumers in these markets. Please.
Thank you for inviting me to this webinar about an inclusive digital payment market. And I'm Kicki Westerståhl, and I'm the head of the Swedish Consumers Banking and Finance Bureau. It's correctly the way you said it. And we are an independent foundation started in 1994. At the Bureau, we are 7 lawyers giving consumers impartial information and legal advice concerning financial products, financial services, and questions related to banks and finance companies. And we report consumer problems and complaints to the supervisory authorities and the industry associations and their members, and also to the State Department and their ministers. We've been doing that for almost 26 years. We've been talking to and listening to more than 100,000 consumers. which has given us a very good overview about how the Swedish financial market has developed over the years. And more importantly, the questions and complaints we handle give us a good understanding about where and when consumers have problems with financial services and products. Many consumers in Sweden have adapted to and are able to enjoy the advantages of digitalization. Most Swedes probably, and many of them perceive that everything with digitalization is working just fine. I was once given the advice, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And I wish I could say today that we see that there's nothing to fix in the digital financial market. But the thing is, even though it's working fine for many people, we know from all the consumers we're talking to that it's definitely not working for everyone. According to the Swedish Internet Foundation survey from 2020, almost 1 million people in Sweden are not or just barely digital. And you, Anna, mentioned more than 1 million, and that's what we think too. The past 2 years, we are receiving more and more calls from consumers who are digital and used to be financially included, but are now being excluded from the financial market. In fact, the most common complaint to the Bureau today is from consumers who have had their payment account terminated. Another very common consumer complaint is that the consumer has applied for a payment account, but their application is denied. So this is a serious problem, we think, and it's obvious that something needs to be fixed. So, is it possible to include all these people in a digital financial market? Annamaria, you said it, you need more financial literacy, of course. And we think still yes and no, because everyone can't be financially literate. Our experience is that there are 3 groups of consumers. In the first group, there are consumers who doesn't want to be digital. And in this group, you will find people who like things the way they used to be. Anna mentioned them too. They want to go to the bank office, they want to be able to use a physical card, and they want to use cash. People in this group will probably eventually adapt or be persuaded to be digital, but only if they can see benefits for themselves. Some of these consumers tell us that they don't want to be digital because they are afraid of being defrauded and to lose their money. So they're actually scared of, even though so that it's in a sense it's rational. It's a rational behavior. In the second group, there are consumers who, for different reasons, are not able to use digital banks or digital payments. In this group, you will find elderly and consumers with cognitive disabilities, or people who lack technical skills. And some consumers actually can't afford a smartphone or a computer. And then this group might also be a lot bigger than you think, because our experience is that some of these consumers, they can make a digital payment, but they cannot handle the security that is necessary to handle when they use their payment instrument. As we all know, the bank robbers didn't disappear when the cash did. Instead, they changed methods. And today, they especially target the consumers in this group. When these consumers act in a digital environment, they become vulnerable, and there's a high risk that they are exposed to criminals. A lot of consumers that call us have been victims of different kinds of fraud, and many lose a lot of money, sometimes all their savings. And contrary to what many seem to think, these consumers are not well protected by the consumer protection rules as they are applied today. It's very hard for these consumers to get any sort of compensation for their losses. So the consumers they are given a huge responsibility, and they are the ones taking considerable risks when using digital payment methods. And these risks, we think, need to be eliminated. Before this is done, you will not have an inclusive digital market in the sense that it's designed for everyone. Finally, in the third group, there are consumers who are both interested and able to use digital payments, but are denied access to the financial system. It's a very basic condition for all consumers to be able to access the digital financial market, and that is to have a payment account. You need a payment account. And the legislator have identified a payment account as being so important that everyone have a legal right to have one. However, as I mentioned in the beginning, the most common complaint to the Bureau right now is coming from consumers who have had their payment account terminated or the application to open a payment account rejected. The reason to all these complaints is the current application in Sweden of the anti-money laundering rules. And to be able to have an including digital financial market, we think it's necessary for the industry, the supervisory authorities, and the regulator to have financial inclusion as their main objective. Everyone needs a payment account. And to succeed in creating a truly inclusive digital payment market, it's crucial to respect the consumer's abilities and disabilities, to make sure that the technical systems are safe and secure for the consumers. And because if the security in the system depends on the consumer's ability to protect a PIN code or not to become a victim of social engineering, we will always fail. The security must be present within the system, not with the consumer as a gatekeeper. Finally, all stakeholders have to take responsibility and make sure that financial inclusion means including everyone. And that means having to start with a payment account. And that's what I would like to start with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Martin, you waited a long time.
Yes.
Martin.
No worries. It's been very interesting to listen in.
Yeah, Martin Forsling is CEO of Bontouch. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, Bontouch.
Slightly French. It's a fintech consulting firm that specializes in helping firms in making financial transactions accessible. Is that a fair way to describe it? Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot. So most of you probably have 4 or 5 of our solutions in your pocket every day, since we work with SJ, PostNord, Swish, Systembolaget, SEB. So our kind of core, what people know us for is that we develop apps, mobile apps, but we also do voice services and web services and similar things. So our task in life, I guess, is to, if I follow on what Kicki said, is to try to limit the second group you mentioned, the people who are not able to use the services. And that's what we try to do a lot. We spend a lot of time with user research, and we try to make the solutions as easy as possible. And I think a lot of things have happened in the last couple of years, maybe 10 years, because in the past you looked at systems where you adapted maybe for people with permanent disabilities, and you made special versions for them. But the more and more as the market develops, you see, if you look at, for example, being visually impaired, all of us are visually impaired at some times. If you stand in the sun and trying to read on your mobile phone, then all of us are visually impaired. So by including everybody, you are also making it better for people that normally don't have any problems by being included. I definitely don't have solutions for all the things you're talking about, Kicki, but trying to inclusiveness has been very important for us. We're about 200 people. We are both in Sweden and the US, but primarily in Sweden. So that's where we are known. I think that's probably enough of an introduction. So yeah, Bontouch, it's both French and Swedish, but try to come up with a domain name that is not taken. Then you have to combine a couple of languages. So that's how we came up with the name Bontouch 10 years ago when we started.
Thank you very much. Before we move on, I have one question from the audience. I encourage you to do more. But first, I would like to give the panel or the introductors a chance to comment on each other. Wave your hand if anybody wants to. Did Anna wave your hand, or you? Yes, you did. Please.
Do you hear me?
We hear you.
Yeah, I was sort of waiting, but yes, I could start. Sorry.
You looked eager to comment somehow.
Yes, I actually am, especially at Dr. Lusardi's point about financial literacy. As Per and I also discussed this morning, one thing we will definitely look at in the inquiry is what happens with financial literacy and the demand for it as everyday lives change and people's habits changed. And one question I raised this morning, which Per really encouraged me to take with me here, and that Annamaria touched upon, is that if we move from a world of fixed bank offices, 2 days clearing systems, fixed physical visits to the banks and cash and so on, if we're moving from that to this sort of fluid world of digital payment systems, millennials doing everything through their phone and other apps, and boundaries between them being sort of challenged, and boundaries between payments and credit being challenged, and all of this instantly and internationally, that obviously requires maybe updated legislation, of course, but maybe it also requires more of financial literacy, because if it's more difficult for the individual to know, when did I actually part with these 100 kronor, then you can't demand the same awareness. So I think you need to increase awareness, and that really calls for, we'll definitely take with us the issue of financial literacy. That discussion was on the agenda in Sweden already 10 years ago, but I think it has another sense of urgency now when we see your findings and also see these kids growing up. I'm a teenage mother myself. You see these kids growing up in a totally fluid, around the clock, second movements, non-bank world. That's seriously something else. So I do welcome policy ideas in this field, and we'll definitely look into it.
Okay. Anyone wants to comment on more, Annamaria?
Yes, so I just want to continue on that. And I have to say, I've always admired, and I continue to admire so much the Nordic countries, who seem to be doing and seem to be at the forefront of so many initiatives, including kind of this fintech movement. But apart perhaps from Finland, we haven't seen as much kind of this push for financial literacy. So, for example, many countries have a national strategy for financial literacy and so on. And, when I looked at this, I thought I'm going to go to the Nordic countries and see what they are doing. And in that respect, there was a little bit less. And so I really do encourage, to take action on this, because I really do think that, the rise of financial literacy is not that it's going to make people make no mistake or not create any problems, but I think it's going to make this system a little bit more fluid and a little bit better working for the individuals. Mm-hmm. Having said that, as of Kicki point, we need to build an ecosystem that promote this better. And, there are so many different cases that make it, this technology not work for everybody. So we have to make, think hard of this ecosystem. But I really hope that one part of this ecosystem is equipping people better to deal with this very changed world where financial decisions happen with the push of a button. And if you push the button, you can get a mortgage.
Mm-hmm. How could we improve the financial literacy? Is it a task for schools or for?
I think it's the task for everybody. I think it does start with the school because that's the way you reach every young person. People are in school, and I think you will benefit the one who are not exposed to that. But when you look at the adult population, I think the workplace can be another important place for financial education, and also at the places where people go to learn and to maybe use the technology and so on. So a lot of other countries which are doing national strategy are really thinking of all of these methods to increase financial literacy. Let me also say, in Italy, we launched a financial literacy month to increase awareness and make sure that, for example, and we invite everybody to do initiative to improve financial literacy. And it could be at the workplace, it could be in their own town. We have worked with mayor, we have worked with employers, we have worked with organizations to kind of help increase the awareness of this topic and make sure that we can also raise the level of financial knowledge.
Who launches the campaign? Is it an organization? Is it government?
Yeah, right. So we have a national committee in Italy designed just for financial literacy. And there are more than 70 countries that have a committee or an organization in charge of financial literacy. So that's something that I think that Sweden doesn't have yet. And Sweden being at the forefront of so many movements, I just hope that it can be in the front line on this as well.
Let's get in touch about it.
Absolutely.
Anybody else wants to comment?
I had two small comments on Annamaria. One was that I thought it was quite interesting with the causality, what causes what in your reasoning. It's very hard for me to see, financial literacy, of course, that's important, but still, using the mobile phone normally shouldn't, or understanding, be technical savvy should not bring you down in a sense. So that was one point. And then also, I think that regulations should be as important as financial literacy, but that's probably something that Anna knows a lot about. But for all the bad behaviors, of course, regulations are also important.
I would agree.
Absolutely.
And the individual needs protection from its own most stupid and worst decisions sometimes. And you definitely need protection from, outer pressure and outer attacks of all sorts. And the constitution of which is changing, as several of you mentioned. So if security is not anymore in the physical bank building, but the important thing is to secure yourself and your money in the fluid digital instant world, that's where the legislator needs to be internationally if needed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, I don't want financial literacy to replace protection and financial, all the legislation. This is definitely what we are always advocating. We really need both, and we need an ecosystem that does that. So I just, my point has been that, we also need to raise just the skills and the knowledge, because now, financial decision just can become so quick. And technology can really, really help. I am, believe me, I am the biggest supporter of the fintech, but fintech has to work for the individual, and that's why they need to be even more, in a sense, financially literate now. That is so easy to make this transaction, and is also you don't see them, right? Everything kind of seamlessly goes and quickly. And by the way, in our recent work, even in a sense, it seems that fintech is attracting, and this is why I don't talk about causality necessarily, but people which have lower financial literacy. And so we see that, for example, even people who use fintech are then ended up with worse financial decisions. And it's not, I think, because fintech, doesn't bring financial decision, but it might be attracting some of the groups which are not financially sophisticated. So I think there need to be a step forward. And I really hope that, in fintech, to me, there is too much tech and too little fin, in a sense. And I would love the fin to be a little bit fin edu, so like financial that also educates you before you push the button and get the mortgage. In a sense, tech is great, but fin as well is great.
I also had a comment on Anna's presentation, which follows on what Annamaria said. And I think that's, you spoke about the key success factors for this digital currency and things like that. And we talk about obvious things like integrity and crisis and resilience and all that. But I think often you tend to forget the end users, the attractiveness, the extra benefits they get, because it's so easy to, I mean, to get people to use things, they really need to have, it shouldn't just fulfill the basic privacy and the basic resilience needs. It should also be the attractiveness to the end users. Otherwise, we will have a new set of cash cards as they had in the 80s, or these kind of solutions that will not be attractive to the end users.
Definitely. Should I answer that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, definitely. But I think Martin and his colleagues are better than I am at developing these attractive features and new technologies and so on. What we've seen, at least in Sweden, the last 10 years or so, is really quite a high level of innovation of services and apps, and user-friendly. It's really consumer-driven rather than inside out, top down, institution driven. It's really driven by how do you use your phone and what do you need to do to get your everyday life to work? And that has driven innovation, businesses, successful businesses, features and apps. So my take on this, I still only in the middle of the work, but my take on this is that let's allow technology and business and innovation to thrive, because that improves people's lives. I'm basically, in essence, an optimist as to what technology can do for humankind. That's why we have it and use it. And, not but the legislator should really protect the resilience of the system and the integrity of the people. So that's not in contrast to innovation. It's rather instead of against. I just want to, so thanks for the question, because that allows me to emphasize that I see very positively to enhance technological innovation. If you look at the groups, both the elderly and those with the disabilities, it's business and entrepreneurship that is now helping people who can't hear or see or use their hands or bodies properly to get better mobile phone features. So businesses, I'm not naive about what business can do, but business and innovation and technology can do quite a lot. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Okay, I have one question from the audience so far. That's from Göran Robertsson here at the Swedish House of Finance. He writes, in addition to being a regulator, the government, the tax authority, the pension agency, etc., is a major user of payment systems. Mm-hmm. Can the government, in its user role, contribute to user-friendly solutions and/or practices, or act as a role model, e.g., promote financial literacy?
Yes, if you look, there's a corona effect in this as well. From the top of my mind, I look at the corona vaccination, vaccine passen, how do you say that in English? So your authority, your proof of being vaccinated is distributed through Kivra, which is an entrepreneur-driven family financed feature that combines, how would you say that, postal services, payments, and ID and the like from different systems into sort of getting government and local and official offices correspondence digital and safe. That's sort of what they do, I guess. And after the vaccinations being rolled out, there was, of course, a demand on, well, again, getting that into your mobile, right, for it to work when you travel, which now, well, businesses have developed, I think. And again, the legislator's role there is to at least not to block and hinder this, but allow it and check for the integrity and security of the people. Kicki would know lots about this as well.
Yeah. You are muted, I'm afraid. Kicki?
Thank you. I would like to comment on that when you talk about Kivra, which is a very good thing. And we're not against digitalization and fintech innovations. The problems we see that they're not for everyone. You need to have a bank ID to log into. You need to have a mobile phone. You need to have a bank ID to log in. And a lot of people don't have it. It's not for everyone. No. So you can talk about financial literacy and producing an ecosystem that is safe. But if you have people that are on the outside, what are you going to do with these people? So, and the fintech, what we see, they usually they innovate products that what the ones they want. Not and the Swedish population, some of them miss their traditional bank services that are no longer available, and you can only use these services if you have a digital legitimate bank ID, which is not available for everyone. So this everyone word is really important to me, and I'm looking at Anna right now because I know you're thinking about this in the inquiry, and that's actually the only thing I would like to say today. Don't forget the people who cannot be included, who doesn't have a mobile phone and doesn't have a bank ID.
No, quick one on that. I see the time's running, but a quick one. I agree with that. I mean, as I said initially, I can end there as well. If you are going cashless and digital in a society as a whole, it obviously needs to be open and available for society as a whole, and that includes everyone, not only the best customers or the innovators or the millennials or not even the pensioners only. You have to have them open for everyone. So Kira was one example of innovation has improved technology, and so did BankID when it came. One issue we will continue to work with is sort of the balance between state and public and private sector here. As you would know, the Swedish BankID system is, well, for a country with this much of a socialist legacy, it's quite interesting internationally that the electronic ID system for at least most of the people is developed through the big banks. After the state discussing it initially and also asking the banks to try do it, and the banks did and now own it. I could stop this seminar at this point by saying that's not uncomplicated if you as a legislator look at systems available for the entire population. Let's come back to that.
Thank you.
We are soon running out of time. I have a question. I had a longer version of it, but I'll skip the longer version. When we're talking about groups of the population who are not included in financial markets, there could be a number of different reasons why they are not included. It could be because of financial literacy. It could be, well, language problems. It could be all kinds of things. Do you have any sort of idea on what are the most important factors behind people or groups of people not being included in financial markets?
I did bring some statistics on it. We could also send that. It's in Swedish, but basically it's really what also Dr. Lusardi mentioned. If you look at the groups with the most problems, you will find the lowest educated, only Swedish grundskola, the pensioners, the physical disabilities. Those are the difficult groups. Difficult meaning they have problems getting bank ID, so electronic ID. They need help with paying their bills digitally, and also to use e-commerce. So it's, I suppose those are the same groups in any country, in any society. The physical disabled is a particular issue that we are studying in the inquiry. And when we met people who work with this, they made us think of that there are also people who can't, not only is there 1 million Swedes who don't use smartphones, but there are also groups who can't use smartphones. Even if you can be no matter how rich, for example, or technologically interested, but if you can't see or use your hands,
Mm.
you are also not included yet. And we will definitely come back to that as well.
So targeting these groups is sort of
Including, I think, for legislation including the entire population and allowing the entire population is an absolute deal breaker. You can't legislate for only 9 or 10 of the population or half of the population. You must legislate for the entire population.
But a financial literacy drive could be targeted to different groups, maybe.
Could be. We will look at that, and maybe, I mean, Annamaria has a good point in, of course, schools is a good starting point for the young. I do have, however, political experience from trying to introduce more math and education time in school. Even that 1 hour of math is a huge political struggle, and you meet all the teachers' unions and different interest groups and other groups. It's quite difficult to do so politically, but it's definitely well worth studying, because financial inclusion is so strategically important for all of your life, really, in society today and tomorrow.
Those were great closing words. We have run out of time. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. And Anna, maybe in a year or a little bit more, we can come back with a completed government inquiry and see what conclusions you have.
Be happy to.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Thanks.